I've been traveling a bit more lately and thinking. We're entering a new era of AI and robotics that's reshaping how I think about where we work, how we travel, and where we call home. How do you future-proof a real estate investment in the face of that? Is Victoria primed for long-term growth in this asset class? And if so, where can you find the edge? Everyone talks about location, but there's more than just geography at play. First, let's start with some of my general assumptions as I start to think about Victoria over the next 30 years. The first of which is that people will continue to live and like the idea of living among other people. I think in an age of digital disconnection, we'll find ourselves drawn more and more to human connection, and that will drive cities to continue to grow over the next couple of decades. That idea supports long-term population growth estimates, and BC Stats has the region growing to close to 600,000 residents by 2046. Over that same period, Vancouver is actually set to grow by more than 45%, and if anything, I think the estimate for Victoria is a little bit conservative. In a similar vein, you have to also believe in long-term economic development and progress, business development, foreign investment, and things that shape the reality of people that live and work here, continuing to progress over time. Depending on where you land on the political spectrum, you could argue that we're not quite on the right mission there, as GDP per capita, productivity rates, and things like growing government could be seen as impediments to that. For context, since 2019, more than 46% of all new jobs in Canada have been public sector jobs, when it's just 16% in the United States. And continuing on the policy side, you have to believe that there isn't a significant enough change that disrupts how we view real estate as an asset class. Things like upping the capital gains inclusion rate or wiping out the principal residence exemption could be examples of that. Now, if you broadly agree with me on some of these themes, we can start to unpack geography and attributes. Over the last 35 years, Victoria has seen a golden rule play out that no one really talks about. Whether you purchased a prestigious home in Oak Bay or a fixer-upper in Colwood, everything is compounded at about 6% annually over that period. There's a reason why places like Fairfield, where I'm standing today, up in Oak Bay, or even further in Cabra Bay, have seen the premium increases and this gap start to widen between other parts of Victoria. They have the ocean-adjacent alpha, beautiful, scenic, walkable, and safe communities close to the sea that have an undeniable lifestyle benefit. But I'm starting to think that that uniformity is about to break, and you shouldn't put your blinders on to other ocean-adjacent neighborhoods. In 1990, the price gap between an average home in Colwood and one in Oak Bay was only about $125,000. That was a gap that a middle-class family could bridge with a few years of saving. But today, in 2026, that spread has exploded to nearly $1 million. We've reached an income ceiling of sorts, and while Oak Bay prices have soared, local incomes haven't. When a starter family home in this area is beginning to approach $2 million, you've priced out 90+% of the professional class. But in seaside markets like Sydney, Esquimalt, Colwood, and Brentwood Bay, the absolute dollar value is still within reach of the working professionals and dual income families that power our economy. You're buying into a lifestyle that matches elements of Oak Bay's charm, but at an entry point that still has room to double. To some of you, this might sound like a guess, but it's a pattern we've seen play out in the world's most iconic cities, from New York to Vancouver to London. The story is always the same. The most coveted areas build the prestige, but the secondary markets build the wealth. In London, everyone wanted to own in Kensington, but it was actually the scrappy borough of Hackney that produced the double-digit returns over the last decade. Why? Because Kensington hit a ceiling. The wealthy looked at the value proposition and said, enough. We call this the Affordability Cascade. When the best neighborhood becomes too expensive, the next best neighborhood becomes the new target. Over the last 5 years in Vancouver, the West Side hit 3 million and stopped growing. In that same time, Vancouver East actually grew by 23%. From 99 to 2025, Manhattan's compounded annual growth rate hovered around 6%. However, Brooklyn's growth in the same period, particularly in emerging neighborhoods, consistently averaged 7 to 9%. By 2025, the prestige gap between the two had shrunk to its smallest margin in history. Effectively, this first part of my thesis is about some of Greater Victoria's catch-up areas, like Sydney, Esquimalt, Brentwood Bay, or Colwood, that offer similar aspects of this ocean-adjacent alpha, Seaside communities that are walkable and safe and could start to catch some of the overflow from our most prestigious areas as they begin to hit their ceiling. And from where I sit in 2026, they look like they could be better positioned for growth. Another growth angle that I think is set to play out over the next 30 years is less about the type of house and more about the utility of the land. As the city of Victoria's population surges, the city is literally outgrowing its skin. We're seeing a density ripple, where land in adjacent neighborhoods like Vic West, Fairfield, and Fernwood is being asked to do 3 times the work it did a decade ago. In late 2023, the BC government passed Bill 44, effectively ending single-family only zoning in every major municipality. By 2026, the second wave, Bill 25, has doubled down on these density rights. We're living through the death of the single-family lot and the birth of the small-scale multi-unit era. The data is beginning to reflect this shift, and although condo starts are beginning to moderate, missing middle housing starts surged 59% year over year versus early 2025. Why? Because the market is starting to recognize the utility of the dirt. Your standard single-family lot is now 3, 4, or 6 units. This isn't just an experiment, it's a proven blueprint. Look at Auckland, New Zealand. In 2016, they upzoned 3/4 of the city's residential land. The result, a massive construction boom that decelerated rental costs and dramatically increased the value of underutilized land. In Victoria, we're currently in the gap phase. While overall building permit values saw a temporary dip in early 2026 due to higher interest rates and less certainty on market product fit, the potential for every lot has never been higher. With these types of missing middle projects hitting the market today, we're getting a clear sense of the types of building forms that are attractive to buyers and starting to lay the foundation for the city of the future. Not unlike the previous category, we see this adjacent alpha play out in every major global city. Looking at New York again, in 2014, there was a massive 87% price gap between Manhattan and Brooklyn, but as Manhattan hit its ceiling, the city didn't stop growing, it expanded. By 2024, Brooklyn's value per square foot was growing at double the rate of Manhattan, and I think that this density implication can apply to cities like Victoria, where neighborhoods like Vic West and Fernwood are our Brooklyn. They're the downtown adjacent hubs where density and growth can drive land values higher as the city expands. When you buy underutilized land here, particularly larger lots or corner lots around the periphery of downtown Victoria, you're effectively buying a call option on the expansion of the downtown core. And as single-family home prices drift higher, I expect we'll see demand continue to rise for this type of missing middle and 3+ bedroom homes that offer walkable, safe communities for families where you're not living in a box in the sky. As our city gets denser, privacy and exclusivity become the rarest commodities, and I have a feeling that some of our most exclusive neighborhoods will stretch the disconnection between asset wealth and local incomes even further. I'm standing in the 465-acre Uplands subdivision designed by John Olmsted and a National Historic Site. The area has about 523 residential lots, and because of some gray area protections and local pushback, there's a lot of signals telling me that it's likely to remain the same. We actually saw a recent example of this along Lansdowne Road, and despite the project technically meeting Oak Bay's zoning bylaws, it was rejected for the second time in as many months in January of 2026 after being reduced to 5 units from 6. Council voted 4-3 in opposition of the project, citing that it pushed the edge of Upland's character. New development in the area is subject to design guidelines that aim to protect the original intention of the subdivision, and a community petition was also signed by about 600 community members lobbying against the project. A recent listing along Beach Drive reached the market at an eye-popping value of almost $28 million, and although it's uncommon to see this kind of price point on the island, there are 6 sales in Vancouver that have all achieved higher sales figures than this. I would argue that over time, high net worth individuals will start seeing the lifestyle benefits and contrast of value between property in Vancouver's Point Grey to Victoria's Uplands. The median price point in Shaughnessy is often in the high $6 million range, while Uplands still sits just above $3 million. There are plenty of examples of a prestige factor driving unilateral growth in a luxury market versus a general trend. And one of those examples actually comes not too far away, just on the Lower Mainland, in an area where some of the highest sales in BC's history have occurred. For the decade spanning between 2003 to 2013, we saw this divergence play out in some neighborhoods of Vancouver. West Point Grey, as a low-density, highly restricted neighborhood north of 41st Avenue, saw massive gains driven by a fixed supply of detached lots and its status as a global asset class. By 2013, it had grown by an astonishing 158% over that period. Victoria Fraserview, on the other hand, more of a utility-based neighborhood tied to local incomes, saw just 60% growth over that same period. Victoria actually outperformed that and grew by 82% over that decade. But once again, areas like the Uplands, which are these sub-markets that don't necessarily abide by general market trends, grew by 114%, and from just over $1 million to just shy of $2.2 million. Another low-density area that could see unilateral growth is just down the road and out on 10 Mile Point. Saanich Lake Oak Bay is facing development pressure, but a lot of their guidelines and policy are formed in their official community plan, which place neighborhood villages as the core focus for density and development. In the case of 10 Mile Point, that's just down the road in Cabra Bay Village, and that's more than likely where you're going to see more condos, townhomes, and infill versus out on the point. There are about the same amount of single-family lots on 10 Mile Point as there are in the Uplands, and I would say it's about 500 in total, as well as 133 strata lots in Wedgwood Estates. Recent subdivisions like Woodlands cater to high-end single-family development, and custom homes on this street are trading in the high $3 million range. As I speak, some jaw-dropping custom-built homes are being erected that will be some of Greater Victoria's finest examples of coastal architecture. A combination of lot size, uniquely rugged and natural feel, and some of Victoria's best waterfront parcels push 10 Mile above Queenswood in my opinion. Time will tell, but based on the foundation that's being laid currently, I see plenty of evidence to suggest that 10 Mile Point will continue to be our city's second most exclusive neighborhood, and both of the areas could see unilateral upside. You could extrapolate what I'm suggesting with this potential exclusivity upside in the Uplands and 10 Mile Point with another tier of real estate, waterfront property. There's less than 2,000 waterfront lots between the core and peninsula in Greater Victoria, and only 133 of those have docks. Now you're talking about the ultimate scarcity play, but the challenge, of course, is the entry point. So where do you go if you don't have the budget for waterfront, but you still want to capture some of that alpha? Finally, we have to talk about the vertical alpha. We're not just talking about high quality steel and concrete buildings from reputable developers anymore with great long-term financial planning. We're talking about the view vault. And one of the only ways to distinguish your asset in a growing city is to find a protected view. As Victoria grows up, anything located in the middle blocks or surrounded by low-rise commercial are at high risk. And although we're seeing some super high towers like 35 stories get rejected at the council level, it's only a matter of time before we start seeing higher and higher towers starting to dominate our skyline. In 2026, with the new density bylaws, the nice view of the city skyline you have today could be a brick wall tomorrow. And if your view isn't protected by water, parkland, or a heritage designated site, it doesn't exist for the long term. The thesis here is simple: buy seaside, or seaside and skyline, or stay away. In our city by the sea, the only lasting scarcity in the condo market is the horizon. A 2-bedroom unit in the Songhees or James Bay with a permanent unobstructed ocean view is a collectible. It defies the standard price per square foot math because it can't be replicated. When you buy an inline condo, you're competing with every other new tower that goes up, but when you buy one of these protected view vaults, you're the only game in town. In 30 years, when the city's twice as dense, the value of blue space will be the ultimate differentiator between a condo that tracks inflation and one that outpaces the market. The math on this is settled. According to Knight Frank Global Waterfront Index, the blue premium is the most resilient force in real estate. In cities like Sydney, a protected harbor view can drive a 121% price premium over a house just 3 blocks away. In Miami, that premium is 93%. Why is the gap so massive? Because of permanent scarcity. In a growing city like Victoria, an inland view is a temporary asset. It can be built over, but a seaside view can be protected forever. One of the areas I'm extremely bullish on over the long term is the Songhees area in Vic West. Because it has protected views from marine traffic lanes and parks, a lot of the condominium projects in this vicinity have views that you know will last a lifetime. It also already features some of our city's most desirable and iconic condominium projects, like Shutters and Bayview 1, and is set to expand in years to come with the Roundhouse development, which is set on 10 acres around the historic E&N Railway terminus. This site is expected to produce up to 1,827 units across 9 towers ranging from 10 to 32 stories. Ultimately, my thesis is grounded in this. In an age where you can produce just about everything from your tablet, computer screen, or by telling your robot what to do, one of the things that you cannot replicate in the digital world is the lifestyle that you can find in one of the world's greatest countries. I continue to believe that if people have more and more optionality as far as where they choose to live, Victoria will be a winner long term. Ultimately, I am a little bit biased. This is my hometown, and I am a realtor. But in conversations with clients of mine that own property elsewhere, and in my travels around the world, I'm starting to see more and more that this is a really special place to call home. If you have interest in making a piece of Victoria your own over the long term and approaching different investment strategies, whether it's for your personal residence or an investment property, feel free to reach out to me. My email is in the description down below, and I look forward to telling you more about our beautiful city in the next video.